Hello, welcome back to YellowCard of TCG. As you can see, there is a deck in front of me. So we are actually not doing a deck profile, but we're instead doing an episode of YellowCard combos. What deck are we looking at? Nightrose, specifically the build from the Premium Deckset. So this video is going to overview a few of the short combos that you can do straight out of the box. This is the deck list as built out of the box by Bushiroad. So I'll be showing you what you can do, what to play for, how to sort of sequence your lines, as well as also maybe an updated version of the deck with a few recommendations and what the real ceiling is, what some high roll combos are. But for now, the first few is just going to be showing you, you've just bought this deck, what can you do? Let's get right into it. So here's the first setup we're going to work with. I've simulated a game to a bit. We're playing against Highlander, they went first. They hit us with an early Pearl Sister. We managed to guard enough, just about swings. Their Reindeer didn't rerun anything impressive, so we're barely surviving. And now we get the first ride, and it's time to rebuild a hand size and put back an aggression. So step one is to ride the Beatrice, which will gain us a Protect marker. Beatrice is on place. Soul Blast 1. Pull out this Ghost Ship. We did go with a Negra Bone, so we could have used that. Or we could even put out the Columbard. We Soul Blasted to search for more pieces from the drop zone, but as is, the list out of the box doesn't come with that many utility or toolbox pieces, like there's no Grenache, there's no Bilba, so we don't need to do that. We're just going to showcase the bare minimum of what you need to do. So Ghost Ship will come down, and then we'll stride using another Beatrice. It's important to get a second Beatrice in the drop zone, or at least one for this combo, to go into Obadiah, because again, we haven't got anything set up. There's no Skull Dragons in here, there's not very much. So Obadiah's effect, Counterblast 1, flip another one, search for 5, put them into the drop zone, and call up to 2. Now, what you search for from deck to drop and what you call out will largely depend on the situation. But here you see we've already got one Night Mist in the drop zone, we've got everything else we need. So in this case, you can probably find it, just search for some random bits and pieces like Skull Dragon for setup, Reach to get it back, Cutlass to use the other Cutlass. In a real game, you'd probably be searching for things like your Grenache or whatever, but I don't know exactly what to search for and when. I don't play Granblue as a main clan. I'm just highlighting the various options you have available to you. We dump a Tommy just because. The shuffle doesn't matter here because we're not trying to fiddle with the rest of the deck, but we're going to put 2, and 2 comes out. And these could realistically be any 2 because we've already made the Ghost Ship. If you had to ride, say, Nightrose instead of Beatrice, this is fine because then you would use Obadiah to pull out the Ghost Ship. But here we're going a little bit of, quote-unquote, high roll. So we then need to pull out the Night Storm, and then we can pull out anything else as far as grade 1s go, like, say, Tommy for boosting, Greed Shade so we can add like one of these triggers back to our hand or get a heal back if we had to use one, or even potentially Cannoneer. The Counterblast 1, retire and draw. So we'll do that just to again highlight how much we can actually draw or plus in this turn. If you want, you can then also use the Cutlass to refund the Counterblast because we don't have Grenache, so we'll just say we do that. And then Countercharge. Sorry, you need at least 1 for the Night Storm, but here we're just going full open, just so you don't have to take that much damage next turn. Anyway, going to attack with the Ghost Ship, end of turn, retires itself and draws. If you already have a healthy hand for whatever reason, you could have used the Skull Dragon instead for better numbers, but we're assuming that on first stride, you're not pushing your opponent too hard. Then going to attack with the Night Storm, end of battle, Counterblast 1, call out the Beatrice, Beatrice on play, Soul Blast 1, back comes the Ghost Ship, calling over the Night Storm. And the fact that the deck comes with 2 Night Storm actually means that we can go further than this if we had more damage, but I'll touch upon that in the end with the other combos. But for now, we can remake Ghost Ship a second time, attack with Vanguard, get our drive checks, swing with Beatrice, swing with Ghost Ship, end of battle, draw and retire. So, not counting the triple drive we got from drive checks, you see that we went overall +2. We gave it the 1 for stride and then we made it back afterwards. And if you need hand, generally what you're going to be relying on is Ghost Ship because you can use it multiple times. But like I said, if you need damage, you'll be relying on Skull Dragon. So this was just a simple 6 attack combo, but we'll go a little bit further next, showing more attacks and what you're actually going to do once you want to push for game. Now here's an example of what a finishing turn would look like. We've called out the Skull Dragon using Negrobone. We're striding into Bartholomew. We've got Nightstorm on the board because we had it in hand. It was Drove Check 1. We've got 3 open Counter Blast and at least 2 Soul Blast to use. These are the critical numbers you need to have. So you can see that we strode over Dire first turn, but we still have our Starter in Soul. We don't have anything else because we played a very conservative first turn. But we're down to just a few cards left in deck. There are definitely 30 cards in the drop zone. 31 exact. So unfortunately we will probably just about squeeze by on the guard restrict for the first few attacks. We might lose it when Bartholomew swings, but by that point our opponent will either have given up enough hand or taken enough damage that the last few swings should get there. This is many more attacks than normal, and a lot of the times you won't be extending to the full extent of this. This is now just showing you exactly what's possible. So the most number of attacks, well, not the most, but a high number of attacks given a setup of board state. So as always, we're going to start with the Skull Dragon, who's going to be huge. He's going to retire himself. And then we can attack with Nightstorm. End of battle effect. Out comes Beatrice. Soul Blast 1. Out comes Skull. Attack with the Skull again. So we'll retire. Attack with the Beatrice. Then on attack with Vanguard, Counter Blast 1. Flip 1. Call 3. So we'll bring back Skull Dragon, Nightstorm, and replace this Cutlass with something that boosts for good numbers, like say Tommy. So you can see here we've pulled some stuff out of the drop zone. So just a quick count to make sure we are still on 30. Yep. So the number of cards in Soul has gone up because we actually Soul Blasted, and that makes up for pulling stuff out of the drop zone. But from this point, we'll Drive Check. And then repeat the sequence again of Skull Dragon, Nightstorm, Counter Blast, Nightstorm to call out Beatrice, Soul Blast 1, call out the Dragon. The only downside here is that we won't be able to boost the Beatrice again, so the trigger numbers, and she can't receive the triggers because she only came out after the Vanguard Drove Check, meaning this column's not going to hit as much, but this gives you a total of 4 Skull Dragon attacks in one turn. Like I said, you won't always be doing full combo like this because you might not have enough soul, you won't have enough damage, Counter Blast open, you might not be at 30, whatever the case may be. But this just shows you that once you have the guard restrict active, even 2 or 3 Skull Dragon swings is going to be enough to close out the game. So here's the other endgame combo. Again, we pulled out a Skull using Negrobone, but you'll see that we had to ride Skull Dragon in this game because we got a little bit unlucky. Unfortunately, the second one was still in rotation, so that's not the end of the world. But here, in some cases, you might have to use Bad Bounty to rewrite over the Skull Dragon, so that you can then Soul Blast it out and continue with the combo. I'm not going to show that here, but just be aware that if that happens, you'll replace this first Skull Dragon with usually like a Greed Shade or a Ghost Ship, or something else that can hit good numbers. And then, throughout this, as I go through this combo, you'll see that I will eventually Soul Blast this Skull Dragon, and then at that point, that'll give you the opportunity to call it back out again afterwards. But for now, we'll go through Bad Bounty. I'll also mention that the deck, as it comes, does not come with the Break Ride Night Mist, and both myself and a lot of the Granblue players I know all agree that Night Mist is not really optimal anymore because it requires you to play in a certain way and jump through certain hoops that just isn't worth the increased benefit. But be aware that the full combo is 14 attacks, and that utilizes Night Mist's Break Ride, but it needs you to have 3 to 4 soul and all of your damage face up, which is obviously not feasible. So here we have only 2 soul, which is a normal number, and only 3 face up damage, which again is barely the minimum you need, but is a lot more representative of a regular combo you will do. So the pattern at this point, you can probably guess, is going to be again Skull Dragon into Nightstorm, we will bring out Beatrice. Beatrice Soul Blast 1 to bring back the Skull Dragon. And now at this point, you probably want to attack with the Vanguard so that you can put triggers onto the Beatrice and the boosters to make good numbers going afterwards. So we'll do our triple drive. Then end of battle, bad bounties effect. Discard our drive checks. And go into the Nightrose, who we milled on turn 1 with a Greed Shade. So Nightrose will then get us a Protect marker and is able to stand. And now we'll continue with Skull Dragon. If nothing else, the reason you want to wait here is because you want to save your boosters for afterwards. So going into the Nightrose first will at least mean that Beatrice can hit some decent numbers. Then attack with the Nightrose, Tunnel Blast 1. Out comes Beatrice, the Skull Dragon. So here I only had 3 counter blasts, not 4. If I had 4, I would have been able to go for another round of Nightstorm loop, a Skull Dragon, Nightstorm, then Beatrice, Skull Dragon again, but we didn't have the counter blast, so again, I'm just showing you the bare minimum. Then drive checks. And then swing. And attack. So you can see that in that instance, I Soul Blasted the Skull Dragon, which I then caught out with the Beatrice, and that's what you would aim to do in those sorts of lines, where you ride a Skull Dragon and need to get it back, or you just need like 1 or 2 extra attacks, which is what Nightrose gives you. Alternatively, you can also swing with the Bad Bounty first to put triggers onto the Nightstorm to make it the most threatening, if you know that you don't have Nightstorm follow-up. So now we'll move into a quote-unquote optimal deck list and some other lines of play you can do. So here you see a few cards that are 1 in the base list that we've added. We've done a regular turn 2, ride Columbard, search for Ghost Ship, and call out the Ghost Ship to get the +1. And now we can go a little bit further. So here we're going to use Navigator and Negrobone, resting the 2 of them to mill 5. And what's really strong about this mill 5 is that not only does it get you closer to Bartholomew numbers, but also just puts cards in your drop zone that you might want to pull out at some point. Like here we have another Columbard, we've got Beatrice that we've managed to set up for next turn, our stride combos, Honley that we can use for surprise disruption during our opponent's turn, and most importantly, Jessie. Now being able to mill the Jessie straight away is also very difficult. You can of course get it another drop zone through other methods, like say with Columbard, or maybe you have like some lucky mills or somewhere else, or maybe you open your opening hand and you just guard with it early. But once you have the Jessie in the drop zone, you can then retire these 2, and Jessie pulls itself out. And the critical thing here is that it also puts Negrobone in the drop zone. There are some other cards you could play like Bilba to get the mills, or Urgula, but these are cards that you don't want to retire in the early game. Likewise, this crit, even though it's fairly low power and low shield value compared to other triggers, you want it to go into Soul, so that you can use the Soul on other things. But for now, this is the quote-unquote high roll of having like an early Navigator, which already sets up your drop zone, finds you the Jessie, which when it attacks will retire itself to countercharge 1. Then you have the Vanguard swing, and then you have Ghost Ship, which will then retire itself to draw another one. And the 2 cards that you called from hand to pull up the Jessie have basically refunded themselves, and you're still on a decent hand size. Now with loads of targets in the drop zone, you can recycle Jessies, you can recycle Storm Ships, and loop them going forward. Something to note is that a lot of the improvements you'll make to the deck aren't actually to do with your endgame combos. The loop of Skull, Nightstorm, Beatrice, Skull Dragon is fairly straightforward and very effective already, and a lot of the changes you'll make to the deck are to do with consistency, resources, and being able to set up this Skull, Nightstorm, Beatrice combo altogether. One such card that I particularly want to highlight is Bilba. It combines everything you need. It is milling, it is board generation, it pulls stuff out, it is selection, filtering, pretty much everything all rolled into one. The slight high roll is that you need to see them, obviously, or chaining them is pretty much impossible unless you get very, very lucky. But even one Bilba can make or break your early turns. So here you see you've got the Columbard, so you can still do the turn 2 Ghost Ship, but with Bilba, you can already do stuff as early as turn 1. So we're going to ride Bilba and take our draw. Assuming we're going first, we can even start building straight away, so no attacks. Soul Blast 1, retire himself, look at 3, call 1, discard the rest. So we're going to discard these 2, Down comes the Greed Shade. On play, we can discard this Nightrose from hand, which is fine because we actually want the Nightrose to be in the discard for when we do our Bad Bounty combo, and Beatrice is really what you're only riding. So then, mill 2, and get something back. And here we're just going to add back the Builder. We milled the Ghost Ship, which is very lucky, don't rely on that. But now it means that when we Columbard, we can now Columbard for Jessie instead, and bring out the Ghost Ship, and then have Jessie to do the combo I just explained. But by adding the Builder back, we can then use this crit in Soul, draw a card, which we then gives the Soul to Bilber again, that we just added back off of the Greed Shade. So call the Overtrigger, because it's 5k and these two are both 5k bodies, you can't call the Sanctitude. It was a pretty unfortunate mill, because obviously Sanctitude can't be added back, but this is still already 10 cards in the drop zone on turn 1, which means that this Greed Shade is going to be live next turn, and this even potentially gives us the chance to maybe first stride Bartholomew if we can get some good G-Guards going. Again, what you mill is obviously random and capricious, but just from this alone, this gives us some good setup. Next turn, we'll take a damage, draw, ride Columbard, searching for Jessie, and out comes the ship. You can even put it here. And then these two bodies are then around to sack for Jessie. Even though we didn't have Navigator, we still have all the cards in the drop zone. Jessie will gain the power. And all we need to do now is find a heal, and we can safely G-Guard in going right up to grade 3 and G-Guard. Otherwise, consider calling over the Greed Shade, getting it back, so that we can Greed Shade again for a heal guard, although we did mill one, and that will help us survive and play the grade 2 game going into fighting for first stride. Being able to set up like your drop zone in this way so that you can just immediately first stride like a Bartholomew or Bad Bounty without needing to quote-unquote waste time with the Obadiah will give you more attacks, which will in turn obviously help you win the game. Now lastly, to round things off, there is one more line I will mention that I'm leaving until the end because it's not really a great line. The fact that the deck comes with 2 copies of Nightstorm out of the box means that this line is possible. With only 1 Nightstorm, which is what I believe to be the ideal ratio is, you wouldn't be able to do this combo, but it's basically every counterblast gives you 2 more quote-unquote attacks. The numbers are very low, so ideally you'll have done this instead of being on Obadiah, you'll have Bad Bountied into a Nightrose, so that you can give your bodies the power as you attack with them, because you won't be able to reset your boosters, obviously. And what this, it's a pretty simple line, is that Beatrice will attack, retire itself from Nightrose, then Nightstorm can attack, end of battle, counterblast 1, bring back the Beatrice, Soul Blast 1, replace the other Nightstorm, and keep going again. You've reset the board every time, and the attacks themselves aren't huge, but if your opponent's on 5 damage, and you have all the counterblasts in the world for whatever reason, it can be a way to push that last piece of damage if you know they have a large hand or you just need a bit of extra extension. Do note that obviously you lose the huge amounts of power you would get with Skull Dragon, and you'd have to wait until the very end for Beatrice to call out a Skull Dragon instead, when you're on, say, like, you know, your last piece of soul or what have you. So it is an option. I don't think you should pursue it, I don't think you should chase it, and I think you should cut the second Nightstorm sooner than later, but that is something else you can do out of the box. In general though, like I mentioned, cards such as Navigator, Bilber, Rolock, these are all cards that will help you get towards your endpoint, which is doing a combo with like Bad Bounty or Bartholomew with the Guard Restrict. And I think that's where a lot of the skill in Granblue lies, not in actually executing your turns, but figuring out what turn you want to execute and how you get there. And unfortunately, like I said, I am not a main Granblue player, so I cannot give advice in that regard. But there are plenty of people who I will shout out in the in the description below and on Twitter. So feel free to hit them up for advice, or take a look at some of their deck lists, or watch some of their gameplay to really learn this deck. I'm sure I'm not the only content creator who's working on this, but this is just more like a very basic guide, sort of, I've just bought this deck, where do I go from here? For things like list upgrades, general lines of play, much more detailed questions, I'll refer you to people who know better than me. But for now, that's going to be it for this episode of YellowCard Combos. Hopefully this has been useful. As always, like the video, subscribe, leave comments, engagement, etc, etc. We'll see you again soon on the next video. Take care, bye bye.